As Jiren prepared to resume his battle against Universe 3, the rest of the Pride Troopers were on the verge of breaking the two-pronged assault launched by Universe 2 and 3. Toppo found himself fighting both Catopesla and Narirama. In his Godly Rush mode, Catopesla's speed wasn't the only aspect that had improved. The form also granted him the ability to create portals, dramatically increasing his mobility. More importantly, he could use those portals to instantly reposition nearby allies, in this case, Narirama. Relying on the combat data stored within his artificial intelligence, Narirama displayed exceptional fighting skills and perfect coordination with his partner. While Narirama maintained a relentless barrage of energy attacks, Catopesla constantly used his superior mobility to divert Toppo's attention, forcing the leader of the Pride Troopers to draw upon more and more of his strength just to keep the advantage. Eventually, he was forced to increase his strength through Ultra Ego, and further enhancing his attacks with Destruction Energy. With it, he finally began overwhelming his opponents. Catopesla's incredible speed was no longer enough to keep up, and with his stamina rapidly declining, using his ultimate mode was no longer a realistic option. Surrounded by a protective layer of Destruction Energy, Toppo simply ignored the attacks directed at him and charged straight toward Narirama. The robot unleashed every weapon in his arsenal against the incoming Pride Trooper. None of them worked. Realizing the danger, Catopesla attempted to open a portal beneath his ally to pull him to safety. But Toppo reached Narirama first. The robot instantly activated a powerful defensive barrier. It wasn't enough. The difference in power was simply too great. Anti-destruction energy infused within Toppo's attack proved overwhelming. With a destruction-imbued Justice Blast, Toppo struck Narirama head-on. The robot's body exploded into many pieces. Although Narirama had been built specifically for the Tournament of Power, and Catopesla had never truly formed a bond with him, the intergalactic sheriff could not help but cry out in frustration as he watched his comrade fall. Driven by anger, Catopesla recklessly charged toward Toppo. Then, a loud signal echoed through his earpiece. It was the emergency retreat order issued by one of his teammates. Whether intentionally or not, the signal brought Catopesla back to his senses. It likely saved him from certain illumination. Without another word, he opened a portal and retreated. Toppo made no attempt to pursue him. Instead, he allowed himself a brief moment to recover. Using Ultra Ego, placed a tremendous burden on both his body and mind. Moments later, he noticed Dispo approaching. "Good job, you made them retreat," Toppo said. "They are all incredibly tough fighters," Dispo replied. There was an unusual sorrow in his voice. Toppo immediately noticed it. "Something wrong?" "Nothing," Dispo hesitated. "It's just one of them, Viara. He gave everything to save his allies." Dispo's own battle had been every bit as difficult as Toppo's. Supported by Paparoni and the robot trio, the Universe 3 warriors forced Dispo to unleash the full extent of both his speed and the divine techniques he had recently learned from Universe 11 Supreme Kai. Expending a tremendous amount of stamina, Dispo created countless after images to evade the perfectly coordinated assault. At the same time, he used telekinesis to hold Paparoni and the robot trio in place before binding them with a massive chains of ki. With his opponents temporarily restrained, Dispo attempted to use his speed to throw them out of the arena, but Dr. Paparoni quickly shut down that plan. Using his staff mentally, he dramatically increased the gravity surrounding himself and his allies. Realizing he would not be able to move them while Viara remained free, Dispo shifted his focus toward eliminating the massive robot instead. Viara, however, had no intention of fighting him head-on. Instead, he rushed directly toward his trapped allies. What followed was a short but brutal beating. Dispo struck Viara over and over again at blinding speed, determined to stop him before he could free the others. Despite the punishment, the armored warrior endured every blow, even as his body became increasingly damaged. For the first time during the battle, Dispo fired a powerful ki blast directly at him. Viara responded by absorbing the attack through his armor, giving the opening for him to reach his allies, shattering the ki chains restraining them. The effort came at an enormous cost. His body had suffered catastrophic damage. Expecting the Universe 3 fighters to continue fighting together, Dispo was surprised when Paparoni and the robot trio immediately chose to retreat. For a brief moment, he considered pursuing them, but Viara's energy suddenly surged once again. Viara had pushed his body to its absolute limits, exhausting every ounce of energy stored within his mechanical cells. Forcing Dispo to face him one last time, the two resumed their battle. Viara displayed remarkable strength and speed despite his battered condition, yet the sudden increase in power could only be maintained for a short time. Combined with the extensive damage he had already suffered, his energy was finally exhausted. His systems completely shut down, becoming unconscious. With hesitation, Dispo carried the motionless warrior out of the arena, eliminating Universe 3's greatest bulwark. After hearing Dispo speak about Viara's sacrifice, Topo fell silent. They are just like us. They are fighting to protect their own universe. He looked toward the shattered remains of Narirama lying nearby. This tournament carries a far heavy burden than any battle we've fought before. For a brief moment, Topo could not help but question the morality of the Pride Troopers' actions. To protect their own home, they had no choice but to destroy those who were trying to save theirs. After a moment, he pushed those thoughts aside. It looks like Universe 3 is retreating for now, he said, turning back toward the battlefield. But the rest of the Pride Troopers are still fighting. Let's go help them. Topo and Dispo immediately contact their teammates through their earpieces, informing that reinforcements were on the way. The battles fought by Casserole and Kunchi's squads had been extremely difficult. Although they were unable to eliminate a single opponent, they accomplished the primary objective, surviving long enough for the veteran Pride Troopers to finish their own battles and come to their aid. The Elemental Squad managed to hold their ground against the relentless assault of Jimis and Baikol, while constantly enduring the long-range support of Harmira and Prum. By the time Topo and Dispo had finished their fights, Kunchi and the others had been forced to unleash their godly elemental forms just to keep the battle under control. Topper remained at the back of the formation, manipulating earth and crystal to shield his teammates from Harmira's sniper attacks, while disrupting the enemy's line of sight. Kunchi and Zoir faced Jimis and Baikol directly, preventing them from taking advantage of their mobility. Meanwhile, Kettle dedicated himself entirely to supporting the squad, constantly healing his allies whenever they were wounded. From their safe position behind the battlefield, Harmira and Prum were the first to notice Sirloin retreating while carrying both Sarbuto and Ravandra. Considering they were one of the strongest fighters of Universe 2, Harmira immediately understood how dire the situation had become. Then, he sensed two powerful energies rapidly approaching, Topo and Dispo. Without hesitation, Harmira ordered an immediate retreat, relying the command through Prum's telepathic abilities. Ribriani quickly received the order to withdraw. The problem was, she could not. At the very moment she was fully occupied fighting the Pride Troopers. Using her extraordinary void magic, Cocotte had successfully trapped both Kakunsa and Rosie inside separate void prisons. Within those prisons, the two magical gears were suspended in complete temporal stasis. However, imprisoning opponents as powerful as the kamikaze fireballs demanded Cocotte's complete concentration. As long as she maintained the technique, she could do nothing else. Protecting her had become the responsibility of Casserole and Buon. Despite facing both Pride troopers at once, Ribrianne had proven herself to be an incredibly powerful opponent. She had gradually gained the advantage over the two veterans. Not enough to break through Cocote's personal defensive barrier and free her allies, but enough to keep the Pride troopers under constant pressure. Casserole relentlessly bombarded Ribrianne from afar with missiles, lasers, and energy projectiles. Meanwhile, Buon confronted her directly in close combat. His objective wasn't simply to hold her back. He needed to endure her attacks long enough for his adaptive technique to gradually build resistance against her abilities. To some extent, it worked. Buon slowly adapted to Ribrianne's attack, reducing the damage they inflicted, but he never achieved complete immunity. The power of love proved impossible to fully adapt to, bypassing even his ability to adapt. Nevertheless, time was no longer on Ribrianne's side. Unable to defeat the Pride troopers before reinforcements arrived, she realized that her friends were in grave danger. If she failed to save them now, Universe 2's chances of winning the Tournament of Power would become almost non-existent. Her determination to protect her teammates surged beyond anything she had felt before. The overwhelming strength of that emotion, the feeling she called love, pushed her power beyond its normal limits. Casserole and Buon immediately sensed the sudden increase in her energy. Both veterans instinctively braced themselves, expecting an even fiercer assault. Instead, the exact opposite happened. Ribrianne had no conscious control over this state yet. It only manifested during moments of extreme danger. Guided purely by instinct, her love chose not to defeat her enemies, but to save her friends. A blinding light erupted from her body. For a brief instant, both Casserole and Buon were completely immobilized. When the light finally faded, Ribrianne was no longer there. Kakunsa and Rosie had also somehow escaped Cocote's void prisons. Feeling her technique suddenly collapse, Cocote emerged from her deep trance. She stared in disbelief. Escaping her void prison in such a manner should have been nearly impossible. The feat alone was enough to reveal just how dangerous Ribrianne truly was. From that moment onward, the Pride troopers marked the leader of the Kamikaze Fireballs as one of the greatest threats remaining in the tournament. With both Universe 2 and 3 now retreating, Topo and Dispo regrouped with Casserole and Kunchi squads to decide their next move. They had several options before them. They could attack Universe 2 or chase Universe 3. Or they could remain where they were and recover the stamina they had spent throughout their battles. For a moment, they even considered assisting Jiren, but knowing the Grey preferred to fight alone, they dismissed the idea. Instead, the Pride troopers chose to pressure Universe 2 before its fighter had the chance to fully recover. Even so, they had no intention of starting another full-scale battle. No universe had been eliminated yet. At this stage of the Tournament of Power, conserving stamina was just as important as defeating opponents. With that in mind, the Pride troopers settled on a different strategy. Rather than engaging Universe 2 directly, they will launch indirect attacks, designed to force the retreating team toward the opposite side of the arena, where Universe 10 was already fighting, meaning that Universe 2 would have no choice but to clash with yet another enemy. Once their plan had been decided, the Pride troopers took a brief moment to recover before launching their assault once again. With that, the middle stage of the Tournament of Power had begun. By forcing Universe 2 into the path of Universe 10, the Pride troopers set the stage for an even more chaotic conflict, one that would soon draw in several other universes' teams, including Universe 7. As the tournament descended into a true free-for-all, the majority of its eliminations were finally about to begin.